Hi, I'm Karen, and this is my Week 6 football picks. Now, it was an interesting week of football last week, and we have an interesting week of football coming up this week. So, let's get right to our picks. The first game that we're going to talk about is between the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this is the first time I actually made my picks and picked one team, and then went to mark my picks down and picked another team. And then, so I kind of went a little back and forth on this one. But the Carolina Panthers, they lost last week 27-30 to the Saints. Now, Cam Newton had 224 passing yards. They did have 7 penalties for 65 yards. Cam Newton was sacked once. They had 2 touchdown passes, and they missed the 2-point conversion, and they had two touchdown runs. Now, they are playing very good. Cam Newton is doing very good job as a quarterback. He has a lot of rushing touchdowns. They are only 1-4. They are going to be a team to reckon with, but they're not there yet. The Atlanta Falcons, now, they lost 14-25 to the Packers, but the Packers are also undefeated. They're just moving along this year. Matt Ryan had 167 pass yards. They had 5 penalties for 44 yards. He was only sacked once, Matt Ryan. They had no second half scores at all. But I think the Atlanta Falcons, they are playing in Atlanta. I think they have more experience. I think all the experts are picking Atlanta. They are 2-3. It's a possibility of an upset with Carolina, but I think I'm going to go with the experts on this one, and I think Atlanta's going to take this one. Now, the next game is a difficult one to talk about. The Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, they lost 24-28 to the Chiefs. Now, Curtis Painter had 277 pass yards. They only had 4 penalties for 40 yards. No sacks, no interceptions, no fumbles. Statistically, they should have won that game. They were leading at the half, 24-14. They should have won the game last week against the Chiefs. I mean, they had that game. I was so surprised when they lost. They're destined to win a game here. Peyton Manning is on the sidelines now. I mean, they're just destined to win. Now, Cincinnati Bengals won 30-20 over the Jaguars. I did pick that one. Dalton had 179 pass yards. They had 4 penalties for 33 yards. He was sacked twice. They had 2 touchdown passes, 1 touchdown run, 1 field goal. They did have a fumble returned for a touchdown. Bengals are doing really good. Now, the Bengals are 3-2. Of course, the Colts are 0-5. Now, the Bengals are really favored to win this game. Of course, all the experts are picking the Bengals. I really I think the Bengals are going to win, but I'm really, really hoping for an upset for the Colts. Actually, Warren Sapp is picking the Colts to win. In my own picks, I'm picking the Colts to win in my own picks. But to give advice to somebody, I would say the Bengals to win. So the Bengals are probably going to win, but I want to be on the bandwagon if there's an upset. So I'm picking the Colts to win on my own personal picks that I do, but the Bengals are probably going to win. Now, the San Francisco 49ers and the Detroit Lions. This is going to be an amazing matchup, but it's going to be a good game. Now, I'm liking the 49ers, what they're doing this year. They won 48 3 over the Buccaneers last week. That was amazing. Smith had 170 pass yards. They had only 3 penalties for 30 yards, no sacks, 1 interception, 1 fumble. They made 2 interceptions. They had 3 touchdown passes, 2 touchdown runs, and 2 field goals. They were just like running all over the Buccaneers. But now the Detroit Lions are undefeated. They won 24-13 over the Bears. Stafford had 219 pass yards. He was only sacked 1 time. They let's see, 5-0, the first time since 1956. They had 12 penalties for 94 yards, so they did have a lot of penalties. Now, Javid Best had an 88-yard touchdown run, and they had, this is the second longest in franchise history was his touchdown run. So that they are playing very, very good, the Detroit Lions. This is just amazing. Detroit, I mean, the fans are, ecstatic that that Detroit is, being undefeated. This is going to be a really great game. The 49ers are 4-1. Of course, the Lions are 5-0. But I think the Lions are just too hot now, and I think the Lions are going to stay undefeated. This should be a pretty easy one to call. St. Louis Rams and the Green Bay Packers. Actually, in one of the statistics, the Packers are favored by 24 points. But the St. Louis Rams, they had a bye week last week. But the previous week, they lost 17-10 to the Redskins. Bradford had 164 pass yards. They had 9 penalties for 65 yards, and Bradford was sacked 7 times. Rams are having a lot of problems this season. But the Green Bay Packers last week won 25-14 over the Falcons. Rodgers had 396 pass yards. They had 6 penalties for 55 yards. He was sacked 4 times. But they made 2 interceptions. They are a strong team. They're the second team undefeated this year. There's only 2 teams. The Packers are doing amazing. There's no question the Packers are going to win that one. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Redskins. This should be a really good matchup. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles, they lost 24-31 to the Bills last week. Vic had 315 pass yards, 5 penalties for 46 yards. He threw 4 interceptions, and they had a fumble. Now, the Eagles are having problems on defense, problems on offense. They just can't get it together. They just are a mess this season. Now, the Redskins had a bye week, but in week 4 they won 17-10 over the Rams. Grossman had 143 pass yards. They did have 10 penalties for 96 yards and no sacks. Now, the Redskins have a really good team this year. They have it together. They're making a lot of plays. They're playing really well. I think Redskins are going to be able to do it. I think they have a much better team. Now, the Buffalo Bills and the New York Giants. This is going to be another great matchup. Now, they're playing in MetLife Stadium. So they're playing in actually New Jersey, not New York. Now, the Buffalo Bills, they won 31-24 over the Eagles. Fitzpatrick had 193 pass yards, 4 penalties for 40 yards, no fumbles. He was sacked once. And the Bills made 4 interceptions off Michael Vick, as we just talked about. And so they made a lot of big plays. They had a lot of turnovers. Now, the Giants lost 36-25 to the Seahawks. Now, Eli Manning had a career-high 420 passing yards. They did have 7 penalties for 52 yards. Eli was sacked 3 times. Now, they did have a tipped ball that was thrown to Victor Cruz that was intercepted, and that was basically one of the deciding plays that they needed. That play, if they had a touchdown, they would have won. Since it was tipped intercepted, they lost. So was that game kind of came down to the end there, to deciding factor. So it was a close game. The Giants, they had a little difficulty in this last game, but I think they're gonna make a comeback, and I think the Giants are gonna take this game. I think they're angry. I think they're gonna be coming back from that loss, and the Bills aren't as hot as they were in the beginning. They're kind of dying down there a little bit. Jacksonville Jaguars and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Steelers actually surprised me this past week, but let's talk about the Jaguars first. They lost 30-20 to the Bengals. Gabbert had 221 passing yards. They had 2 penalties for 15 yards. He was sacked 3 times, and they fumbled 4 times and lost 2 of them. They had 1 touchdown run, 1 touchdown pass, and 2 field goals. So the Jaguars are they're not playing that good. Now the Pittsburgh Steelers won 38-17 over the Titans. Ben Roethlisberger had 228 pass yards. They did have 5 penalties for 51 yards. He was sacked once. Now, they tied the club record with 5 touchdown passes, Ben Roethlisberger. 2 touchdowns passes were to Hines Ward. They had a great turnaround. The Steelers were falling apart. Everyone wrote them off. And last week, the Steelers came back stronger than ever. So I think the Steelers are going to beat the Jaguars with no problems. Another good game and good matchup is going to be the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Houston Texans lost 25-20 to the Raiders. And Schaub had 416 passing yards, 6 penalties for 50 yards, sacked 3 times. They threw 2 interceptions. They had 2 touchdown passes and 2 field goals. That kind of was an emotional game for the Raiders, so the Texans really didn't have a chance with that one. Now the Ravens, they had a bye week, so in week 4, they won 34-17 over the Jets. Flacco had 163 passing yards. They did really well. They kind of just ran all over the Jets there. The Jets had an embarrassing game. So I think the Baltimore Ravens are going to be able to win this game with no problem. And I think they're going to pull out the win. Cleveland Browns and the Oakland Raiders. Now, the Cleveland Browns had a bye week. In week 4, they lost 31-13 to the Titans. Colt McCoy had 350 passing yards. They had 5 penalties for 40 yards, and he was sacked 4 times. The Browns are struggling a little bit this season. They started out okay. They're 2-2, so they're kind of struggling a little bit. As you can see, they're kind of 50-50 there. Now, the Oakland Raiders, they won 25-20 over the Texans. Campbell had 190 passing yards. They had 11 penalties for 89 yards. He was sacked 3 times. They made 2 interceptions. One was in the end zone to secure the win. That was by Michael Huff. Now, that was a very emotional win with Al Davis passing away. You knew the Raiders were going to win. It was just their heart and soul was in it. It was a very emotional win for them. And I think the Raiders, they're 3-2. I think they've got the momentum going, and I think the Raiders are going to win. Next matchup, the Dallas Cowboys and the New England Patriots. This is going to be we got a lot of great matchups this week, a lot of good games. Now, the Dallas Cowboys had a bye week, which they needed a bye week because they had a lot of people to heal. Tony Romo, Des Bryant, a lot of people. Now, the Cowboys lost 34-30 to the Lions in week 4. Romo had 331 passing yards. They had 7 penalties for 33 yards. Romo was sacked 1 time. He was intercepted 3 times, and 2 of them were for touchdowns. So he was given touchdowns to the Lions. They had a 20-3 lead at halftime and blew it. So the Cowboys really have a lot that they need to straighten out, and they need to get themselves back in order. Hopefully they're able to do that in their bye week. Now the Patriots won 30-21 over the Jets. Brady had 321 passing yards, 6 penalties for 50 yards. He was sacked 4 times. They had no interceptions. Now the Patriots they were playing amazing. They did great over the Jets. I think the Patriots are going to keep their momentum going, and they're going to beat the Cowboys. Now the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now the New Orleans Saints won 30-27 over the Panthers. Breeze had 359 passing yards. They had 9 penalties for 82 yards. No fumbles. He was sacked 2 times. They had 2 touchdown passes, 1 touchdown run, and 3 field goals. Drew Brees is doing great. Darren Sproles, the Saints they're playing solid football. They're just doing really good. Now, Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost 48-3 to the 49ers. Freeman had 187 passing yards, 9 penalties for 96 yards. He was sacked 3 times, threw 2 interceptions, only had 1 field goal. They couldn't get anything together, not strong at all, so I think the Saints will be able to win them, no problem. The only home team I haven't picked this week. Now the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. Minnesota Vikings really surprised me last week but they learned how to score some points. Give the ball to Adrian Peterson and run. Keep the ball out of Donovan McNabb's hands. Because they won 34-10 over the Cardinals. McNabb only had 169 passing yards. They had 5 penalties for 35 yards. He was sacked 1 time. Rushing, Adrian Peterson made 3 first-quarter touchdowns. That's what they had to do. And they made 3 interceptions. But the Chicago Bears, they lost 13-24 to the Lions. Cutler had 249 pass yards. He was sacked 3 times. They had 14 penalties for 104 yards. But the Bears are playing really good football, solid football. I think they are doing really well. So the Bears are going to be able to beat the Vikings. And last but not least, the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets. Well, I said that. But the Miami Dolphins, they had a bye week. Week 4, they lost 26-16 to the Chargers. Matt Moore had 167 passing yards. He had 2 penalties for 41 yards. He was sacked 3 times. Chad Henne is out for the season with a shoulder injury. They did sign Sage Rosenfels, but Matt Moore is starting. Now the Jets lost 30-21 to the Patriots. Sanchez had 166 passing yards. 8 penalties for 89 yards, sacked 2 times. Green Ellis had 27 carries. And Jeremy Curley did very well. They went back to their running game, did a lot more running. So I think the Jets will be able to beat the Dolphins. So just to have a wrap up, it will be, I feel, the Falcons over the Panthers, the Bengals over the team that I love, even though I think the Colts will have an upset. The Lions over the 49ers, the Packers over the Rams, the Redskins over the Eagles, the Giants over the Bills, the Steelers over the Jaguars, the Ravens over the Texans. The Ravens over the Texans, the Ravens over the Texans, the Raiders over the Browns, the Patriots over the Cowboys, the Saints over the Buccaneers, the Bears over the Vikings, and the Jets over the Dolphins. So enjoy your week 6 of football, and I'll see you next week.